Hello future CS, welcome back to my channel, your one-stop guide for everything related to CA exams. If you are new here, I am Pooja, a chartered accountant. I have an experience of working for Ernst & Young and KPMG, and I help CA aspirants like you succeed with practical tips, strategies and support. Are you preparing for the CA final financial reporting and wondering what the ICAI expects from you in the exam? In this video, I bring you a crisp and powerful summary of the BOS webinar, Series 1, directly from the ICAI. We'll cover the question paper pattern, topic-wise exclusion, smart revision tips, common errors committed in the exam, and how to avoid these errors, and how you can actually boost your marks in the exam. And we'll also be going through the ABC analysis. So don't miss this video. It's your shortcut to a smarter and more focused preparation. So get your notebooks so that you can note down all the important points that we'll be discussing today. Also guys, if you are new to my channel, I request you all to subscribe and hit the bell icon below so that you can get notified whenever I post new videos. So the first point discussed in this webinar was the question paper pattern. So out of 100 marks, 30% is for MCQ and the balance 70% is for descriptive type question. So in MCQ, all the MCQs will be case scenario based MCQ itself. And all questions are mandatory in MCQ. There is no choice available. There will be totally 15 MCQs of 2 marks each. There is no negative marking also. And all the MCQ will be application and analysis based MCQ. So for MCQ question, if you have to do any rough calculation, what you can do is in the main answer sheet itself, you can give a heading as rough calculation for the MCQ and you can do the calculation there and then mark it on the OMR part. So for the MCQ answer, you have to mark in the OMR part of the answer sheet itself. Now coming to the descriptive part, which is for 70 mark. So in this, totally 6 questions will be there of 14 marks each. Out of these 6 questions, you have to answer any 5 questions. So one choice will be there. And apart from this, there will be one more internal choice as well in one of the sub questions. So the next point discussed in the webinar was the topic-wise exclusion from the syllabus. So some topics are excluded from the syllabus. So let's have a look at it. So the first topic is Appendix B of Ind AS 16. So Ind AS 16 property, plant and equipment, this is there in the syllabus. But under this Appendix B, that is stripping costs in the production phase of surface mine, only this Appendix B is excluded from the syllabus. And then under Ind AS 37, Appendix A and Appendix B are excluded from the syllabus. So that means Ind AS 37, this is there in the syllabus. Ind AS 37, provisions, contingent liability and contingent assets. So this is a part of the syllabus. However, under this, only Appendix A and B are not there in the syllabus. That is Appendix A, rights to interest arising from decommissioning, restoration and environmental rehabilitation funds. And Appendix B, liabilities arising from participating in a specific market, waste electrical and electronic equipment. So these two appendices are not there in the syllabus. And then the following Ind ASs are completely excluded from the syllabus. That is Ind AS 29, financial reporting in hyperinflationary economies. Ind AS 117, insurance contracts. Ind AS 106, exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources. And Ind AS 114, regulatory deferral accounts. So these 4 Ind ASs are completely excluded from the syllabus. Next, some key points discussed in the webinar were as follows. So for the September 2025 exam, the relevant study material is November 2024 edition. And the amendments, notification and limited revisions issued up to 28th February 2025 will be applicable for the September 2025 exams. So basically, whenever your exams is, the amendments and notification issued 6 months prior to your exam will be applicable for your exam. So since in this case, the exam is in September 2025, the notification amendments issued till 28th February will be applicable for your exam. So these amendments and notifications should also be available on the BOS knowledge portal itself. And in your syllabus, Ind AS itself is applicable. However, the following AS, there are 4 AS on which questions might be asked, testing the differential treatments in both AS versus Ind AS. So let's see which are those 4 accounting standards. So AS7, AS9, AS19 and AS22. So only for these 4 AS questions might be asked relating to differential treatments as to what is the difference in the treatment in Ind AS versus AS for these 4 standards only. So the next key point discussed was wrong quoting of Ind AS name, number or paragraph may lead to deduction of marks. So if you do not know the Ind AS para number, do not write wrong para number in the solution, as this might lead to deduction of marks. So what is important is writing the Ind AS name and number. So when you are studying itself in one sheet, you can note down the Ind AS name and number and you can learn that correctly. So that at least you can quote the Ind AS name and number correctly in your answers. Next is use the proper format. That is whether you are preparing balance sheet or P&L, use the proper formats that is applicable. And next is prepare adequate working notes. So directly do not compute the solution on the calculator and do not just write the final answer. It is important to write the working notes clearly because there is stepwise marking. It is very important to show all the working notes because sometimes it might happen that the final answer might be wrong. Whatever final answer we have derived, that might be wrong. But if we have shown step-by-step working note, we will get marks at least for those working notes. Hence, it is important to show the working notes. The next key point is answer the question with due emphasis on provision of Ind AS. So whatever question is given, you have to analyze as to which provision of Ind AS it belongs to. And then you have to write that provisions. You have to correlate the facts in the question with the provisions of Ind AS and then you have to derive the answer. So the first step will be to analyze as to which Ind AS the question belongs to. The next important point mentioned in the webinar was to state the assumptions clearly. So sometimes it might happen that there is some ambiguity in the question and you might be required to make some assumption to solve the question. At that time, you have to clearly state as to what assumptions you have made while solving the question, so that this will also give clarity to the examiner as to based on what assumption you are solving the question, and there will also be marks allotted to the assumption as well. The next key point is write the answer as per the question. That is, first you have to see the verb in the question, whether the question is asking to compute or whether it is asking to analyze or whether it is asking to define, and you have to write accordingly. If in the question they are writing to define something, but you are just showing some computation, then you will not get marks. Or in the question, if it is written as compute something, but we are just writing theory part of it, that will also not fetch mark. So we have to see what is the requirement of the question and then we have to answer accordingly. So the next important point discussed in the webinar was sources from where you should be studying for the exam. So the first source is your study material and the next source is MCQ portal. That is to practice different types of MCQ. In the BOS knowledge portal itself, you have MCQ portal. And apart from this, as I mentioned earlier, in the exam, case scenario based MCQ itself will be asked, that is application and analysis based MCQ. For this you have to study the case scenario booklet. So under this there are different types of case scenario and different types of MCQ. So it is recommended to solve all the MCQ from this case scenario booklet. And then the next source is Saransh. So the institute has itself prepared a summary form for each of the Ind AS. This summary is in the form of diagrams, flow charts, pictorial representation, etc. This is easy for revision purpose. So you can use this. And the next source is the revision test paper. So it was suggested that along with the revision test paper for your attempt, for FR it is recommended to go through the revision test paper of the previous 3 attempts as well. So if you are appearing for the September 2025 attempt, you will have to go through the RTP of September 2025 plus May 25, November 24 and May 24 RTP as well. And the next source is the suggested answer or the previous year papers. And the next source is the mock test paper or the model test paper. So model test papers are nothing but the collection of the past 6 mock test paper. So a minimum 2 mock test papers at least you have to practice. So in every attempt the ICAI itself releases 2 sets of mock test paper. So it is important to attempt these 2 sets. So it was recommended that how much ever possible you have to attempt the mock test paper. So suppose you are giving only one group and you have more time left, that time you can attempt at least 3-4 mock test paper. However, if you are giving both groups and you do not have much time, then minimum 2 mock test paper at least you have to attempt. And some suggestion was given for mock test paper. That is, the first suggestion is you have to attempt the mock test paper in the same time as the exam time, so that this will give you a practice of writing the real exam. And then one more important tip is, after writing the mock test paper, you have to analyze the mock test paper. You have to see whether you are able to answer the concepts correctly. And you have to also see what is the nature of mistake you have done, whether it's silly mistake or whether it's calculation error. If you have made these type of errors, you can practice more. And you have to check whether you are unable to remember the concept. So if your conceptual clarity is missing, go through the concepts again. Also, do not memorize the concept. You have to try to understand what the concept is. And one more suggestion was, when the question is big, it is important to break down the question into parts and do it in different parts. And while going through the mock test paper, you have to also see whether any topic has come in the mock test paper which you have not studied, or if there is any topic which you have studied but you are not confident about it. So in this case, you will have to study those topics again. And then one more point is time management. That is, you have to check whether you are able to complete the mock test paper within the stipulated time. So when you analyze the mock test paper, you have to analyze as to under which category you are losing how much mark, and you have to try to work on that so that you have mitigated all these points before the real exams. Next, some tips were given on last minute revision. So personal notes, if you have self-prepared notes, you can go through that. And also while studying, if you have underlined any important concepts, you can study that. And then for practical questions, when you will be studying the Ind AS and you will be solving the practical question, mark tricky questions covering most of the concepts of the particular Ind AS. And then you can revise those type of questions one day before the exam. And also in the BOS knowledge portal, you can find Saransh. So this contains summary of all the Ind AS in the form of flowcharts, tables, notes, etc. So you can go through this as well. Next, some tips was given for effective study. So here it was given that plan your studies in advance itself and avoid last minute rush. And ensure you understand each concept clearly and do not do rote learning. And it was also suggested, do not do selective study. Study theory part also, because sometimes theory questions also will come for 4 marks, 5 marks. because some students ignore theory in numerical subject. So it is important to study theory also. Do not do selective study. The next point mentioned was to think positively. And also it was suggested to practice meditation and exercise also, so that you can keep your mind calm and also you can take care of your health, because it is very important to take care of your health also during the exams. Now some specific points to be taken care of while preparing for the examination. So the first point is to go through the entire syllabus and do an in-depth preparation of the entire syllabus. And as I mentioned earlier, do not do selective study. And one more important point is most of the Ind AS are interconnected. So skipping any of the Ind AS may lead to vacuum in conceptual clarity, and preparation for the exam remains incomplete. So even if you see in the case scenario booklet, in the case scenario questions that are asked, the case scenario gives different types of Ind AS. So to solve one case scenario itself, we'll have to apply 2 to 3 Ind ASs. Hence, do not skip any Ind AS. It is very important to study all the Ind AS. If you study the entire syllabus completely, you will be able to gain confidence in the subject, and also you will have surety that you will fare well in the exams. And also you should focus on all types of questions, whether numerical or theoretical. While you are studying the study material, go through all the types of questions. The next important point is do written practice of each question without referring to the solution. This will help you to develop analytical skill and also proper understanding of the concept. And this will also help you to learn time management, gain speed, and this will also lead to better hand-mind coordination, and you will be able to express your answer better when you are answering the theoretical question in the exam. One more important point is alertness while computation. This is for the practical question. So in practical questions, lot of computations are required. So most of the times it was noticed by the ICAI that students apply the correct concepts and knowledge, but many times some silly error is done in the calculation part. So what are these types of errors? Let's see. First is consideration of wrong figure. Next is in place of addition you are doing subtraction, or in place of subtraction you are doing addition. And one more error is like alteration of number at the time of copying figures from calculator to your answer sheet. That is unconsciously or interchanging the digits. For example, instead of writing 1025, you have written as 1052. So this will lead to wrong calculation in all the further steps. So while solving the numerical questions, be alert and conscious about the calculation and the amounts that you will be writing in the solutions. The next important point is follow proper formats while preparing the financial statements. That is, in this paper, Division 2 of Schedule 3 of the Companies Act 2013 has to be followed for preparing financial statement as per Ind AS. Hence, prepare as per this format itself. The next point discussed in this webinar was how to improve marks in the exam. So first write the answer to the question which you know the best. So this will create a positive impression in the mind of the examiner. And your handwriting should be legible. Maintain your speed while writing the answer. And also, as mentioned previously, answer the question with due emphasis on the provisions of Ind AS. And attempt all the subparts of the question in one place itself. And start every answer including every subpart in new page. So suppose you are answering question number 2. Subpart A, B and C, everything should be answered at one place itself. Now suppose you know the answer for subpart A and subpart C, but you do not know the answer for subpart B. So what you can do is write the answer of subpart A, and for subpart B leave some space and then write the answer of subpart C. And later on you can come back and write the answer of subpart B as and when you remember. And there is no need to do rote learning. You can write in your own language, but use the key terms as used in the Ind AS. Use some key terminology. So in each Ind AS there will be some key terminology. So try to use that and do not use layman words. The next point discussed in this webinar was how to manage time in the exams. So the question paper will be given 15 minutes in advance. However, this extra reading time is only for descriptive part of the paper. So whenever you are reading any question, first read the requirement part of the question. Then identify as to the question belongs to which Ind AS. And these steps you can follow while practicing the MTP as well. And one more tip given was don't keep any numerical questions for the last. So if in the end you are answering and there is only few minutes left, and suppose you have choice between one theoretical question and a practical question, it is better to answer a theoretical question at that time, because for theory question the answer will be ready in your mind, but for numerical question you have to do step by step, and hence more time might be required. And if you are confident with MCQ, you can start that writing that first, like you can start solving MCQ first. So depending on whatever you are comfortable, you can start that first. So you have to do the planning in the first 15 minutes. So first you have to be clear in your mind as to which question you will answer first and in what sequence you will answer the question. So first you go through the entire question paper, and then you will have to decide. There is one choice right in the descriptive part. So you will have to decide as to which question you won't be answering. And then the remaining question are the ones which you will be answering. So for that you will have to decide in which order you will answer those questions. So it was suggested first to answer the question which you know the best, and then the next question which you know the next best, and so on. And allocate an estimated time for each question based on their difficulty level and marks carried. And also ensure you keep aside at least 10 to 15 minutes for revision purpose. The next important point discussed in this webinar was some do's before the exam. So when you're studying for the exam, maintain continuity and keep a fixed routine. And also, if possible, follow a weekly study schedule. And it was recommended to study 2 subjects per day, that is one theory and one practical subject. And do not study on the bed. It is better to sit on a chair along with the table, and if possible you can study like that. And train yourself for long sitting hours equivalent to exam duration. And attempt mock test paper in the same time as exam slot. And as mentioned earlier, after writing the mock test paper, analyze mock test paper and maintain a subject-wise analysis register for mistakes and self-introspection. And also surround yourself with positive quotes. Be positive and confident. Avoid negative surroundings which make you feel down or which hampers your confidence. And also believe in yourself and believe in your preparation. And also plan for your studies and revision one day before the exam. So in advance itself, you have to plan how you will be revising one day before the exam. Do not leave anything for last moment. Take proper sleep before the exam. This will keep you fresh while writing your paper. And also eat a decent and well-balanced nutritious meal at the right time. Do not skip any meal nor do overeating. Now let's see some do's during the exams. So it was recommended to write clearly in your exam. Do not do any overwriting and all. And for any question, if they have asked to prepare balance sheet and P&L, we have to prepare notes to account. Notes to account form part of our balance sheet and P&L unless they have specifically mentioned as do not prepare notes to account. And the last page of your answer booklet can be used for rough work. So if you want to do any calculation for MCQ, you can show this in the last sheet of your answer booklet. Give heading as a rough work for MCQs. And one more thing suggested was, if you are unable to solve any question, like if you have solved a question half, and if you do not know how to continue it, leave some space for that, continue with the others, and you can come back to it later when you remember it. For theory questions, write in bullet points. And also you can underline the keywords. If there is time, you can do like this. Now some don'ts before and during the exam. That is, do not panic or do not get anxious during the exams. Now some don'ts after the exam. So by chance, in case your performance is not as per your expectation, forget about it so that your performance will not affect the other papers. Just focus on the remaining papers and try to give your best in the remaining papers. And do not discuss the exam paper after coming out of the exam hall. And do not compare your performance with the performance of others. So the next most important point discussed in this webinar was the typical errors committed by the students in the examination. So almost 26 errors were discussed in this. So request you all to note down these errors so that you do not commit these errors in your exams. So now let's discuss these errors one by one. So the first error noticed was lack of in-depth study. So most of the times it was noticed that comprehensive study covering the entire syllabus was overlooked by many of the students. And the students were doing selective study. So please avoid selective study. The next error noticed was lack of focus in theoretical portion. So in most of the practical papers, it was noticed that students do not focus on theoretical understanding of the concepts. So theory questions were generally skipped at the time of preparation. The third error noticed was lack of written practice. So for practical or numerical questions, adequate written practice is required without referring the solution. However, it was noticed that many students solve practical questions orally on the calculator itself. By doing this, they do not apply their mind fully. Rather, they simply endorse the solution given in the study material. But for development of the analytical skill and proper understanding of the concept, it is essential that students do written practice for each and every question by hand. This will also help them in time management and also to gain speed. The next error noticed was lack of complete knowledge of formats. So in FR, formats play an important role in the presentation of financial statements. It was observed that students solve the question correctly, but do not prepare their financial statements in the applicable formats. The next error noticed was improper understanding of questions. So in theory questions or Ind AS based questions, it was noticed that students do not read the requirement of the question properly and they present vague answers without sufficient explanation and reasons. For example, if a question requires you to explain the treatment of the transaction, but you calculate the amount and end the answer without substantiating the same with the relevant provisions of Ind AS and presentation in the financial statement. Though the figure calculated is correct, you will still get less marks or you will get no marks because you did not explain the treatment as it was asked in the question. The next error noticed was improper time allocation for questions. Most of the times it was noticed that students gave irrelevant details even for small questions, thereby spending unnecessary time on the questions which is not required. So it was advised that students should restrict their answers according to the marks allotted to the question. The next error, which is one of the most silly errors, is mentioning wrong question number. So it was observed that most students are attempting parts of the question at different places and also they do not write the correct question number and its subpart number correctly. Consequently, while checking the answer book, even though the answer is correct, the appropriate marks are not awarded. The next error noticed was improper presentation of working notes. So working notes form part of the solution and carry mark. However, it was found that students directly calculate the amounts in the calculator and write the same in the main solution without substantiating it with the help of necessary working notes. This is one of the main reasons of losing vital marks. So working notes and assumptions are also important. So if you are making any assumption to solve your answer, please note that down as well. Your assumption should be logical and realistic, and it should give clarity to your answers. The next mistake noticed was calculation mistakes. In practical question, a lot of computations are required. Most of the times it was noticed that students apply correct concepts or knowledge, but many a times make mistake in the calculation part. These calculation mistake may occur either due to consideration of wrong figures or error in addition in place of subtraction or subtraction in place of addition. Next error noticed was copying of wrong figures. So as we discussed this earlier, it was sometimes noticed that students arrive at the correct calculation, but later on at the time of copying it in their answer sheet, they unconsciously interchange the digit places of the amount. For example, as we discussed earlier, rupees 1025 is written as 1052. The next error noticed was carry forward mistakes. So one of the most common errors committed by the students is wrong carry forward of the amounts from one page to another page or from one account to another account. So this results in mistake in all the further computations wherever that amount is used. Hence, this leads to loss of marks. The next error noticed was no discussion on assumptions. That is, assumptions are not given properly. At many places, assumptions are required to be mentioned in the solution, since it is the base on which your solution is derived. So most of the times it was noticed that students overlook this, and though they solve the questions correctly by taking the assumption, but they fail to mention the same in the solution. Thereby, this leads to loss of marks. The next error noticed was incorrect naming of the relevant Ind AS. So it was noticed that students sometimes mention the wrong Ind AS name, number and para in their solution. So it is advised that if they are not sure, then they should avoid mentioning the wrong para number. Quoting the wrong Ind AS name number may lead to deduction of marks. The next error noticed was lack of comprehensive study. So most of the times it was noticed that students prefer selective study just by referring the examination papers of the last 5-6 attempts only. However, this affects the understanding and performance during the examination. Hence, a comprehensive study covering the entire syllabus of the subject is required. This is overlooked by most of the students. The next error noticed was lack of conceptual clarity. So most of the times it was noticed that students lack focus on major legal provisions, case law or understanding of the practical implications. Besides, it was also noticed that students ignore the important terms and definitions used in the Act at various places. So they get confused whenever a question based on the definition is asked in the exam. The next error noticed was ignorance of bare acts. So most of the times it was noticed that students have no habit of reading the bare acts. So it is necessary for better understanding of the provisions contained in the various statutes and the way the legal provisions are given. This will improve their performance while presenting their answers, and this will also help in drafting better answers. The next error noticed was lack of preparation of brief notes. The preparation of brief notes helps in recapitulating the main concept during the examination. Normally, students refrain from preparation of brief notes. These notes act as a capsule during the examination. You can use this for revision purpose as well. The next error noticed was lack of practice in examination conditions. So most of the times it was noticed that students do not write the past exam question paper or mock test paper under the exam like condition, and they also do not assess their preparation. The next error noticed was lack of knowledge of significant amendments. So it was noticed that students are not updated with the recent amendments for the specific paper in the examination. Accordingly, the questions based on the recent amendments are left untouched by a large number of students. The next error noticed was planning. So it was noticed that students do not plan their time during the examination. Most of the times after writing the exam, no time is left for revision. Students are unable to attempt the complete paper in the given time. So it is important that students must finish their paper within the allocated time, and some time must be saved for revision also at the end. The next error noticed was lack of conceptual understanding of the requirement of the question. So it is suggested that students should read and understand very clearly what is required by the paper setter. Sometimes students misunderstand the requirement. This is reflected in their answer as they are not able to understand the requirement of the question that has been picked from the illustration of the study material or the past exam paper itself. Also, it was noticed that students start a particular question and thereafter realize that they have made a wrong choice. This results in time wastage and the question remains unanswered, or it is answered in a hasty manner which affects their scores. The next mistake noticed was the answers were not written up to the point. So most of the time students preferably write more than required to show that they know a lot about the said concept. However, this adversely affects on their performance because now they have limited time for the other questions. So marks allotted and time required for attempting the question must always be kept in mind. Always be concise and write to the point, and do not try to fill pages unnecessarily. The next error noticed was lack of logical reasoning or assumption is missing where there is an ambiguity in the question. So in case where the question is not clear, we may state our assumptions and answer the question. A proper logical expression must be there about this assumption in our answer. The next error noticed was improper presentation of answer. So it was noticed that in most of the answer sheet, the presentation is not neat and it has lot of scratches and overwriting. So because of same, even if the answer was correct, appropriate marks were not awarded. So it was noticed that the answers are so untidy that it impacts the marks directly. So students should emphasize on the presentation of the answers to make it more legible and appealing to catch the examiner's eyes. The next error noticed was improper formulation of answers. So most of the times it was noticed that students do not know how to formulate their answers properly. They do not answer as per the requirement of the question, and consequently important points are missed out. So mainly these were the errors which were leading to loss of mark. So ensure you note this down, and if you are making any of these errors, please correct them now itself so that you are fully prepared before you go for the real exam. So now we'll be discussing the chapter wise ABC analysis. So here we have the ABC analysis. First we have category A. So the following Ind AS or topics come under category A. So the questions from these Ind AS will be asked in every attempt for 12 to 14 marks. So you can pause the video and note down these topics. So now we will see category B. So following Ind ASs and the following topics will come under category B. So the questions regarding this will be asked in alternative attempt as per the past trends, and it will be asked for 8 to 10 marks. So you can note this down as well. Now let's move on to category C. So here we have the Ind AS or topics. These are the ones coming under category C. So based on the past exam trend, the frequency of this is less and the weightage is also less. So please pause this and note down this as well so that you can plan your studies accordingly. Next, we will see some queries. So some queries were raised by the students. Let's see what were those queries. So one query asked was, can abbreviations be used in the exam? So it was informed that some common abbreviations like PPE for property, plant and equipment, and EQSH for equity shareholders, and EPS for earning per share, and then SOCE for statement of changes in equity, and SPL for statement of profit or loss. Like this, common abbreviations can be used. However, uncommon or unheard of abbreviations shall not be used in the examination. And the next query asked was whether scale and pencil should be used in the exam for drawing lines for balance sheet, P&L, etc. So it was mentioned that if time permits, you can use. Otherwise, you can just fold the paper into half and you can segregate for balance sheet and P&L and you can continue your answer. So guys, this brings us to end of this summary. Actually, this webinar was conducted for the September 2025 exams. But it was also mentioned that students appearing in January 2026 exam also can follow these points. However, if you are appearing for the January 2026 exam, ensure you read the amendments that are released up to 6 months before your exam date, which will come later on in the BOS knowledge portal. So guys, if you found this summary helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon for more updates and strategy on CA final preparation. Also share this video with your study group because a focused plan is half the battle won. All the best with your preparation and I will see you all in the next video.